Vision is all about the eye and the brain working together. The story of vision starts when light enters the eye. Light goes through the pupil, the black opening in the eye, and is focused by the lens onto the very back of the eye, which is called the retina. And in the retina are cells that will have a chemical reaction in reaction to the light and create an electrical signal that is sent back to the brain. The front part of the eye is called the cornea. It's curved, so it will bend light into the pupil. The pupil is what looks black when you look at someone's eye. It's an opening like a donut hole created by the iris. The iris is the colored part of the eye, which can expand and contract to make the pupil bigger or smaller. When there's a small amount of light, the pupil gets bigger, for example. And then the lens is behind that. The lens focuses the light on the very back layer of the eye, which is called the retina. And inside the retina are cells that are sensitive to light because of the chemical that they have. The chemicals in those cells are called opsins, and the cells themselves are called photoreceptors. Photo means light, so they are reactive to light. Light goes into the retina and stimulates the photoreceptor cells, which are called rods and cones. Rods are very sensitive to light, and a small amount of light will turn them on. Cones require more light to be turned on, but there are 3 different types of cones in a normal human eye, and they respond to different wavelengths of light, which your brain then converts to color. Light enters the eye, is focused by the lens onto the back layer of the eye called the retina, and their photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, have a chemical reaction that creates an electrical signal, and that electrical signal is passed to other cells called bipolar cells, and then to other cells called ganglion cells, and those ganglion cells exit out the back of the eye, which creates the optic nerve that goes to the brain. Here's a photograph of the rods and cones in the retina in the back of the eye. Rods are sensitive to light, and so we use rods at night when there's a small amount of light. Cones require a lot of light, so we use cones during the day. Humans are called trichromatic, meaning 3 colors, which means we have 3 different types of cones that are called short wavelength, medium wavelength, and long wavelength cones. And these send information to the brain, which gets perceived as color. The 3 types of cones in the retina are sometimes called blue, green, and red because of the wavelengths of light that they respond to. So for example, if you look at a greenish flower or greenish leaf, as in this example, the blue cone is not turned on at all. The green cone is turned on 90%. The red cone is turned on 55%. This gives your brain a certain perception of color. If a person is born missing one type of cone, they have a type of color blindness. Most people have eyes that are trichromatic, meaning they have 3 different types of cones. But some people, because of genetic mutations, are born with only 2 different types of cones. That's called dichromatic. And we have red-green color blindness and blue-yellow color blindness, which are shown here in this illustration. The cells in the retina in the back of the eye do some computation of the incoming signal and then send an electrical signal back to the brain through what is called the optic nerve. The optic nerve is made up of axons, the long fibers that come out of the ganglion cells of the retina. Okay, it's time for some cartoons. An eagle has very, very good vision because it has many, many compact photoreceptors in its retina. So here's the eagle at the optometrist, and the optometrist says, "Can you read the bottom line?" And the eagle says, "Yeah, eyechart.com." Wow, that's good eyesight. Insects have what are called compound eyes. They can have as many as 40,000 units in one eye, and some insects might have 4 or 5 different eyes. So here's the insect that's at the optometrist. Very good. You have perfect 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20 in that eye. Now cover your other eye. Ha ha ha. Let's go on now. Visual information is processed in the very back lower part of the brain in the occipital lobe. We have our primary visual cortex, and the auditory signals from our ears go to the temporal lobe where we process hearing or sounds. Here we see brain scans that show activity in the visual cortex. The visual cortex in the very back of the cerebrum in the occipital lobe has specialized areas for processing different information about the visual world. This illustration shows the visual pathway. Light goes into the eye, stimulates cells in the retina, an electrical signal is created which travels through the optic nerve. 2 optic nerves, one on the left, one on the right, which come together at the optic chiasm, and then half the information from each optic nerve goes to the left and half to the right, and the information goes to the thalamus, the relay center in the brain, a certain place in the thalamus called the lateral geniculate nucleus receives that visual information, and then that thalamus sends the information all the way back to the primary visual cortex, which is in the occipital lobe in the lower back of the cerebrum, and the cells there give you the sensation of seeing. Here is another illustration of the visual pathway. Light enters the eye, electrical signals are created by the cells in the back of the eye in the retina. Those electrical signals travel through the 2 optic nerves and come together at the optic chiasma, where half the information goes to the left, half goes to the right from each optic nerve. The information goes to the thalamus, to a place called the lateral geniculate nucleus, and then from there to the visual cortex, which gives us your feeling, your sensation of vision. Here's another good illustration of the visual pathway, and this one adds another little complication. Some of the signal, the visual signal from the thalamus, goes to the brain stem, the lower part of the brain, and there's an area there called the superior colliculus that gets this information. This is not conscious information, so we unconsciously can react very, very quickly to visual information. So think of an animal like an owl that has to respond quickly to the location of its food, a mouse, for example. And this is done without the cerebrum, without conscious awareness. So we have this area in our brainstem that does respond to vision, and this is called the superior colliculus. Superior just means above. And there is another inferior colliculus that gets auditory information that is unconscious. So your brain has a lot of information it's not telling you about. That's the unconscious part of the brain. Visual information from the eye is first processed way back in the lower part of the brain in the occipital lobe in the primary visual cortex. But then that information moves forward in the brain and divides into 2 different pathways for vision. One goes up into the parietal lobe. This is called the dorsal stream or the where pathway, and the cells in the parietal lobe will take that visual information and figure out the location and the movement of what is being seen. The second visual pathway is called the what pathway or the ventral stream. The visual information goes from the primary visual cortex into the temporal lobe, and the cells there in the temporal lobe figure out what it is that you're looking at. What color is it? What shape is it? And so on. So we have 2 different visual pathways, the what pathway and the where pathway. Interestingly, people with brain diseases usually have damage in the temporal lobe, which means they often have trouble recognizing what something is, yet they can still reach for it. They can still tell visually where the object is in space, and so they can reach for it or walk towards it, but they have difficulty naming it or perceiving what it is visually just by looking at it. Scientists, of course, are trying to find out ways to help people who have visual impairment. This includes genetic therapies, which some of them have been successful, and also interesting techniques of using a camera that can send information to the occipital lobe to try to help people who have visual problems. Okay, that brings us to the end of this video on vision. I hope you learned a lot from it and enjoyed it a little bit. Be sure to watch some more of my videos. My channel's called Brucey. I've got lots of psychology videos there. Bye.